There's a specific kind of person who genuinely prefers Friday night alone over Friday night out, not because they're depressed, not because they have social anxiety, not because they can't make friends, they just prefer it. And if you're one of these people, you've probably noticed something strange. The world treats your preference like a problem that needs solving. Here's what happens. You decline another social invitation because you genuinely want to spend the evening reading, working on a project, or just thinking. And someone inevitably says, you need to get out more. Or you can't isolate yourself like this. Or my personal favorite, you're going to regret not making memories. And here's the thing. They're not being malicious. They're genuinely concerned, because in their minds, choosing solitude equals loneliness, and loneliness equals suffering. So if you're choosing to be alone, you must be suffering, even when you're clearly not. Now let's be clear about what we're not talking about. We're not talking about social withdrawal due to depression. We're not talking about isolation born from trauma or anxiety. We're not talking about people who want connection but can't figure out how to get it. Those are real issues. They deserve real attention. What we're talking about is something completely different. People who have rich social lives available to them, who are perfectly capable of connection, who genuinely enjoy people, but who also deeply value, crave, and protect their alone time. The introvert who's happy at the party but happier when it's over. The person with close friendships who still needs 3 days to recover from a weekend trip. The individual who can network brilliantly at work but comes home and doesn't speak to another human for hours. These people aren't broken, they're just wired differently, and psychology has finally started to understand why. Here's what researchers have discovered. There are actually two completely separate psychological systems at play. The first is your need for social connection. The second is your capacity for solitude. And here's the critical part. These two systems don't operate on the same spectrum. They're independent variables. You can be high in both. You can be low in both. You can be high in one and low in the other, which means enjoying solitude doesn't mean you lack social needs, and having strong social connections doesn't mean you can't crave alone time. Psychology has a term for this: self-determined solitude. It's solitude that you choose, not solitude that chooses you, and the research is absolutely fascinating. People who engage in self-determined solitude show higher levels of creativity, better emotional regulation, stronger sense of identity, more authentic relationships when they do socialize. They're not avoiding connection. They're creating the psychological space necessary to connect more meaningfully. Think about it. The programmer who solves their hardest problems during solo walks. The writer who needs silence to hear what they actually think. The therapist who gives all day and needs evening solitude to refill. These people aren't lonely, they're recharging, but society keeps misreading the signal. So what's actually happening in the brain during healthy solitude? 3 specific processes. First, cognitive restoration. Your brain has a default mode network, the system that activates when you're not focused on external tasks. During solitude, this network kicks into high gear. It processes experiences, it consolidates memories, it makes unexpected connections between ideas. Social interaction, even positive interaction, suppresses this network, because when you're with others, you're externally focused. You're reading facial expressions, you're moderating your responses, you're navigating social dynamics. All of that is cognitively demanding. Solitude gives your brain permission to turn inward, to think the thoughts that only emerge when nobody's watching. Second, identity consolidation. There's a concept in psychology called self-concept clarity. How well-defined and consistent your sense of self is. And here's the thing. Self-concept clarity requires reflection. It requires asking, what do I actually think about this? Not what does my friend group think? Not what would get approval? Not what's the socially acceptable position? Just, what do I think? That question only gets answered in solitude. People who regularly spend time alone have significantly higher self-concept clarity. They know who they are because they've spent time with themselves. Third, emotional regulation. This one's counterintuitive. You'd think social support would be the primary way we regulate emotions, and for some people it is, but for others, solitude is actually more effective. Research shows that people high in preference for solitude recover from stress faster when they're alone than when they're with others, not because they're avoiding support, but because their nervous system genuinely calms more efficiently in solo environments. Think of it like this: some batteries recharge through connection, through plugging into other people. Some batteries recharge through disconnection, through periods of non-use. Neither is wrong, they're just different designs. So how do you actually navigate this? How do you honor your need for solitude without falling into actual isolation? Strategy 1: the calibration practice. Here's the distinction that changes everything. Learn to tell the difference between solitude that energizes you and solitude that numbs you. Because here's the thing: not all alone time is created equal. Energizing solitude has specific characteristics. You engage in activities that require attention: reading, creating, thinking, and learning. Time passes quickly, but you remember what you did. Afterward, you feel clearer, calmer, more yourself. Numbing solitude looks different. You're scrolling, binging, avoiding. Time disappears, but you can't remember where it went. Afterward, you feel foggy, disconnected, vaguely guilty. Same behavior on the surface: being alone, completely different psychological outcomes. The calibration practice works like this. After each period of solitude, ask yourself 3 questions. Do I feel more energized or more depleted? Do I feel more connected to myself or more disconnected from everything? Do I feel clearer about what matters or more confused? If the answers are energized, connected to yourself, clearer, that's healthy solitude. Do more of it. If the answers are depleted, disconnected, or confused, that's avoidance masquerading as preference. Do less of it. The external behavior looks identical. The internal experience is completely different. Learn to calibrate to the internal experience. Strategy 2: the boundary script. Here's where people who love solitude run into trouble. They know they need alone time, but they don't know how to communicate that need without sounding antisocial, so they make up excuses. I'm tired. I have a headache. I have work stuff. And here's the problem with excuses: they're temporary. They invite solutions. You're always tired. Maybe you should see a doctor. Take some ibuprofen and come anyway. Can the work wait? And then you're backed into a corner. Either you go and resent it, or you admit the excuse was fake and feel guilty. Here's the script that works better. I really value my alone time, and I've learned I function better when I protect it. I'm not available tonight, but I'd love to specific alternatives. 3 components. 1: stated preference. I value my alone time. Not I'm tired or I can't. I value this. 2: functional reason. I function better. Not I'm weird or I'm antisocial. This is how I operate effectively. 3: specific alternative. I'd love to grab coffee on Tuesday. Not maybe later or some other time. A concrete offer that shows you do value the relationship. This script does something crucial. It reframes your solitude as a positive choice, not a rejection. It educates people about your needs without apologizing for them, and it offers a connection on terms that work for you. Most people respond surprisingly well, because you're being honest, and honesty is actually easier to work with than vague excuses. Strategy 3: the connection audit. Here's the final piece. People who love solitude sometimes make a critical error. They assume that because they need less social interaction than others, they need very little social interaction. And that's not quite right. Even people high in preference for solitude still need connection. They just need it less frequently and in different forms. The connection audit works like this. Once a month, ask yourself, in the past 30 days, have I had at least one conversation where I felt genuinely seen and understood? Not 10 conversations, not daily check-ins, just one. One real conversation where you shared something true and someone got it. If the answer is yes, you're probably calibrated well. If the answer is no, you might be drifting into isolation rather than choosing solitude. Because here's the thing. Humans are social animals. Even the most introverted among us need to be witnessed occasionally. We need to know that someone knows us, that someone would notice if we disappeared, that our internal world occasionally intersects with someone else's. One meaningful conversation a month, that's the minimum viable dose for most people who prefer solitude. It might sound low to extroverts, but for people wired for solitude, it's often exactly right. Less than that, and you start losing touch with shared reality. More than that, and you might be over-socializing out of obligation rather than genuine desire. Find your number and protect it as fiercely as you protect your alone time. So let's bring this together. If you're someone who loves spending time alone but isn't lonely, you're not broken, you're not antisocial, you're not missing out. You're engaging in self-determined solitude. A psychologically healthy practice that enhances creativity, identity, and emotional regulation. The 3 strategies: calibrate to internal experience, not external behavior. Communicate boundaries clearly without apology or excuse. Audit for minimum viable connection so solitude doesn't drift into isolation. And here's what happens when you do this well. Your alone time becomes more restorative because you're not feeling guilty about it. Your social time becomes more meaningful because you're not forcing it. Your relationships deepen because you're showing up as yourself, not as who you think you should be. You stop trying to be more social, and you start being more intentional, which is actually what everyone's looking for anyway. If this resonated with you, do 2 things. First, subscribe. We explore the psychology of how people actually work, not how they're supposed to work. Second, drop a comment. Are you someone who prefers solitude? And what's the biggest misconception people have about you because of it? I read every comment, and I'm genuinely curious. Before we go, here's something I've been thinking about. If you're someone who needs a lot of alone time, you've probably also noticed another pattern. You think differently when you're by yourself than when you're with others, not just different thoughts, different quality of thinking. And that raises an interesting question: how much of what we call our personality is actually just how we perform in social situations, and who are we when nobody's watching? We'll dig into that next time. Until then, honor your wiring. The world needs people who think deeply, and deep thinking requires solitude. I'll see you in the next one.